Britain did not rise to power because of kings. It did not rule the world because of soldiers. It did not dominate oceans because of ships. Its real power came from something buried underground, something black, dirty, and easy to ignore. Coal. Before the 18th century, Britain was not the center of the world. It was a small island nation on the edge of Europe, competing with larger empires like Spain, France, and the Ottoman state. Its land was limited. Its population was modest. Its resources seemed ordinary. Nothing about Britain suggested it would one day command a global empire, but beneath its soil lay something that would change history forever. Britain sat on vast reserves of coal, closer to the surface than in most other parts of Europe. For centuries, coal had been used as a simple heating fuel. Black rocks burned in homes to fight cold winters. No one considered it the foundation of world power. It was dirty, smoky, and unpleasant. But in the hands of Victorian engineers and inventors, coal became something entirely different. The Industrial Revolution did not begin with factories. It began with energy. Before coal-powered machines, work depended on muscle, animals, wind, and water. Production was slow and limited by nature. Rivers could power mills, but only where rivers flowed. Windmills worked, but only when wind blew. Human and animal labor had strict limits. Coal changed this rule completely. With coal, energy could be created anywhere, anytime, in any quantity. Steam engines burned coal to create mechanical power on demand. Factories no longer needed to be built beside rivers. They could rise inside cities. Production could run day and night. Output multiplied beyond anything the world had seen before. Coal-powered iron furnaces that created stronger machines. Coal-powered locomotives that carried goods across the country. Coal-powered steamships that crossed oceans without relying on wind. Britain was no longer limited by geography or weather. It had unlocked artificial energy. This energy advantage gave Britain something no other nation had at the time. Speed. Goods could be produced faster. Transport could happen quicker. Ships could move reliably across the globe. Armies could be supplied efficiently. Trade could expand at a pace rivals could not match. While other nations still relied on traditional power sources, Britain ran on coal, and that difference quietly shifted the balance of global power. Coal did not just power machines, it powered an entire economic system. British factories began producing textiles, tools, and metal goods in massive quantities. These goods were cheaper and more consistent than handmade products from other countries. Global markets flooded with British products. Steamships powered by coal gave Britain control of the seas in a new way. Unlike sailing ships, steamships were predictable. They did not depend on wind patterns. They could travel fixed routes, on fixed schedules, carrying goods and soldiers with reliability that changed naval strategy forever. Railways spread across Britain like veins. Coal-powered trains connected mines to factories, factories to ports, and ports to the world. Transportation costs dropped dramatically. Goods moved faster than ever before. Britain became a perfectly connected industrial machine. This industrial strength translated directly into military strength. Warships powered by coal could outmaneuver traditional fleets. The Royal Navy became the most advanced force on the oceans. Britain could project power across continents because it could move faster than anyone else. Coal also fueled the expansion of cities. Urban centers grew around factories. Millions of workers gathered in industrial hubs. Production scaled to levels unseen in human history. Britain was no longer just a country. It was an engine. Other nations noticed. But they could not copy the model easily. Many did not have accessible coal reserves. Others lacked the engineering culture that Britain had developed. By the time rivals began industrializing, Britain had already established a massive lead. This lead allowed Britain to dominate trade routes, colonize distant lands, and build the largest empire the world had ever seen. Not because it had the largest population, not because it had the strongest army, but because it had mastered energy before anyone else. Coal was the silent force behind British dominance, and the world did not fully understand its importance until it was too late to catch up. As Britain's coal-powered industry expanded, it began reshaping the global economy. The empire did not grow only through conquest. It grew through supply and demand. Countries that once produced their own goods found it cheaper to buy British products instead. Local industries in India, Africa, and parts of Asia slowly declined because they could not compete with machine-made British textiles and tools. This created a new kind of dependency. Colonies were no longer just sources of raw materials. They became markets for British goods. Cotton flowed into Britain. Fabric flowed back out. Iron ore entered British ports. Machinery left them. Coal was at the center of this exchange, powering the entire system. The Royal Navy ensured that this trade moved without interruption. Coal-powered steamships could patrol sea routes continuously. Britain could enforce trade dominance, not only with cannons, but with logistics. The empire became a network of ports connected by energy. Coal also changed warfare. Factories could produce weapons, ammunition, and equipment at speeds no rival could match. During conflicts like the Crimean War and later colonial campaigns, Britain's industrial capacity allowed it to sustain military operations far from home. Armies could be supplied across oceans with consistency and speed. The empire's communication systems also relied on coal-driven technology. Railways transported messages and personnel across the country rapidly. Telegraph lines, often laid alongside railway tracks, allowed near-instant communication between cities and ports. Decisions could be made faster. Responses could be coordinated quicker. Britain operated with a level of organization that others struggled to achieve. By the mid-19th century, Britain had become the workshop of the world. Its dominance was not based purely on political control, but on economic gravity. The rest of the world was pulled into its orbit because British goods, ships, and systems were simply more efficient. Coal had transformed Britain into a self-sustaining industrial organism. Every part of the empire fed into this system, and the system in turn reinforced British power. This cycle of energy, production, and trade became the foundation of global influence. The true strength of Britain was no longer measured by the number of its soldiers, but by the amount of coal it could burn each day. But coal's power had limits. As other nations began discovering and exploiting their own coal reserves, the British advantage slowly narrowed. Germany and the United States industrialized rapidly in the late 19th century, building their own coal-powered factories and railways. The energy advantage that Britain once held exclusively started spreading. At the same time, new sources of energy began to appear. Oil-powered engines proved more efficient for ships and vehicles. Electricity began replacing steam in factories. The world was entering a new energy era, and coal was no longer the sole driver of progress. Britain's empire, built on coal, struggled to adapt to this transition. While it had mastered steam and coal-based industry, newer technologies required different resources and strategies. Other nations, less tied to older systems, moved faster into the oil and electrical age. The very foundation that had lifted Britain to global dominance became a weight it carried into the 20th century. Industrial centers that once symbolized power became outdated. The empire still existed politically, but its technological edge had faded. By the time World War I and World War II arrived, Britain was no longer the only industrial giant. Its early lead had given it a massive empire, but maintaining that empire required more than coal could provide. New forms of energy, new industries, and new economic powers reshaped the global balance. Coal had made Britain rule the world, but it could not keep it there forever. The story of British coal is not just about fuel. It is about how energy shapes power, how technology reshapes history, and how a resource buried underground can determine the fate of nations. Britain's rise was written in smoke and steam, powered by black rock beneath its soil. And for nearly 2 centuries, that black rock quietly controlled the world.